The air inside the televised town hall was thick with tension before Trump even spoke. His signature smirk plastered across his face as if the entire event were staged for his amusement alone. Jasmine Crockett sat across from him, her posture upright, her eyes locked on him with a calm steadiness that almost seemed to unsettle the former president.
Wow.
Though he would never admit it. Cameras flashed, journalists shifted in their seats, and millions watched live from their living rooms as the moderator tried to maintain control of what was already spiraling toward a heated confrontation. Trump, leaning slightly forward into the microphone, made a show of glancing down at his notes before delivering the kind of insult he'd perfected over decades, personal, biting, and calculated to provoke. "Jasmine," he drawled with faux pity, "I've heard about your so-called marriage. Sad thing is, I don't think your husband even respects you. It's probably because you're too busy chasing the spotlight instead of being a good wife." There was a ripple of gasps across the audience, a few muffled chuckles from his loyal supporters, and the moderator's eyes widened in visible shock at the audacity of the remark. But Jasmine didn't flinch. Her fingers rested lightly on the desk in front of her, her breathing steady, and her silence in that moment was louder than any immediate comeback could have been. Trump, sensing that he had hit what he believed was a vulnerable nerve, leaned back with a smug expression, clearly convinced that the blow had landed. What he didn't realize was that in exactly 47 seconds, his entire facade of dominance, bravado, and untouchable power was about to be dismantled in front of the world in a way that would replay across networks, social media feeds, and late-night monologues for weeks to come. Those seconds ticked by as Jasmine measured her words, letting the tension build like the quiet before a storm, her mind racing not with anger, but with a precise, razor-sharp plan to strike at the very core of his legacy. She knew this was no longer about her marriage. This was about exposing the rot at the foundation of his public image. The truth buried under years of bluster and political theater. The crowd, sensing something was about to happen, shifted in their seats, eyes darting between the two, like spectators at a high-stakes boxing match. The moderator, perhaps aware of the approaching verbal detonation, tempted to steer the conversation toward policy. But Jasmine raised her hand slightly, a subtle gesture that silenced the room. She leaned into her microphone, her voice low at first, but carrying enough force to command absolute attention. It's the kind of tone that makes even the most confident opponent suddenly aware that the ground beneath them is about to give way. "Donald," she began, her voice deceptively calm, "you've spent your entire career trying to define strength by belittling others, especially women. You've built your political brand on insults, on playground taunts dressed up as leadership, on the idea that tearing someone down somehow makes you taller. But here's the problem with your strategy. It only works if nobody is willing to call out the truth about you in real time. And that truth is this: you are a man terrified of being exposed, not as a political fraud, not even as a moral one, but as someone who has never actually built anything that can stand without your name plastered on it like a fragile facade. You talk about my marriage? My marriage is built on mutual respect, trust, and love, things you've never been able to sustain in any relationship, business or personal. But let's not stop there." Her voice rose slightly, not in anger, but in conviction, her words cutting through the air with surgical precision. "You want to talk about family values? Let's talk about the $130,000 you paid to silence a woman you had an affair with while your wife was pregnant. Let's talk about how your idea of loyalty is demanding it from others while betraying them the moment they're no longer useful to you. Let's talk about the bankruptcy six, them that left small business owners ruined while you walked away richer. Let's talk about how your so-called charitable foundation was shut down because you used it like your personal piggy bank, even buying a portrait of yourself with donor money." The audience, once divided in their reactions, was now almost entirely silent, their attention fixed on her. Trump's smirk faltered slightly, the corners of his mouth tightening, his eyes narrowing not in confusion, but in recognition that this was spiraling beyond his control. "You've insulted my marriage, Donald, but I'm going to dismantle your legacy in front of the entire nation. And I'm not talking about the fake, gold-plated image you've been selling for decades. I'm talking about the real one, the record of lies, fraud, and failure that you've spent a lifetime trying to bury under self-promotion and intimidation. She paused for the briefest second, letting her words settle, then delivered the blow that would define the night. Your legacy isn't power. Your legacy is fear. Fear of truth, fear of strong women, fear of a world where you can't control the narrative. And tonight, that fear is on full display. Now the room erupted, not in chaotic shouting, but in a collective exhale of energy. As if everyone present knew they'd just witnessed something historic. Trump tried to interject, his voice slightly louder than before, as though volume alone could overpower the substance of her words. That's just fake news, all lies. You're reading from the Democrat playbook, he began, but Jasmine didn't give him the courtesy of finishing. Her hand went up again, not in aggression, but with the same calm authority of a judge silencing a courtroom. Donald, the playbook I'm reading from is the truth, she said, her voice firm but measured. The truth doesn't belong to Democrats or Republicans. It belongs to the American people. And they've been robbed of it for far too long by people like you. The truth is in your court records, in the settlements you've paid, in the testimony of your own former allies who finally found the courage to speak once you no longer had the power to crush them. The truth is in the lives of those who believed your promises and were left with nothing but debt and disappointment. The truth is in every worker you stiffed, every contract you breached, every law you skirted because you thought your money and your name put you above accountability. Her voice didn't waver, even as Trump grew visibly agitated, his cheeks reddening, his hands tightening around the edges of the podium. The moderator glanced nervously at the control booth, as though wondering whether to intervene or simply let the moment run its course. But it was clear to everyone in the room that any attempt to stop her now would only backfire. You've spent years telling the American people that you're their champion, she continued, but champions don't prey on the vulnerable. They don't divide communities for personal gain. They don't undermine democracy just to cling to relevance. You've talked about making America great again. All you've done is make it smaller in compassion, smaller in honesty, smaller in the values we claim to stand for. The audience began to stir, a mix of nods and murmurs of agreement. While Trump shifted uncomfortably, his earlier bravado replaced by an uncharacteristic stiffness. You insulted my marriage, Donald. I'll recover from that. What you'll never recover from is the reality that history will remember you. It's not as the strong man you pretend to be, but as a man whose empire of ego collapsed under the weight of truth. There was applause now, hesitant at first but growing in force as her words echoed across the room, bouncing off the walls and back into the ears of a man who had built his identity on never losing a public battle. The 47 seconds had long passed, but the damage was permanent. Trump's attempts to speak again were met with a chorus of interruptions, not just from the audience, but from the moderator, who reminded him that Jasmine still had the floor. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering, and spoke in a tone that carried not just criticism but finality. The problem with building your legacy on fear, Donald, is that fear crumbles the moment people stop being afraid. Tonight, I'm telling you and everyone watching that I'm not afraid of you. The truth isn't afraid of you. And the America that's coming next, the one built on accountability, equality, and justice, won't be afraid of you either. Her words weren't shouted, but they landed with the weight of a gavel's final strike. The kind that signals not just the end of an argument, but the end of an era. Trump's expression had shifted entirely now. The smirk was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped glare that betrayed more than frustration. It revealed the unfamiliar sting of being truly cornered without an escape route. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of discomfort, every tightening of his jaw, every micro-expression that suggested the performance was over, and the man behind it was exposed. The audience's applause swelled again, not wild or chaotic, but steady and sustained. It's like the sound of a tide coming in, inevitable and unstoppable. Social media feeds lit up within seconds, hashtags exploding, clips of her dismantling spreading faster than the network's own live feed. Pundits would later debate whether this was the moment his political career suffered a blow it couldn't recover from. But for those in the room, there was no question. They had witnessed the unmasking of a man who had built his power on intimidation, only to watch it crumble in the face of a woman who refused to be silenced. Jasmine sat back in her chair, her composure unshaken, and simply folded her hands, as if to say her part was done, and the rest was up to history.